Hi, this is Sally Morgan and Tristan Corgi for Conversations with a Corgi. And I am a physical therapist, a craniosacral therapist, and a Tellington TTouch practitioner for animals and people. And Tristan is a Corgi. Today we're going to continue our discussion about some of the TTouches that you might use with your horse or your dog or your cat or your bunny. And today we're going to talk about tail TTouch. To do tail TTouch, you might think you need an animal with a tail. But in fact, Tristan does not have a tail, and that does not mean that we should not work with the tail that he had. Corgis and many other breeds of dogs have their tails docked early in their life, usually just after birth. And they still have, just as a person who's lost a limb, phantom limb pain, residual memory, and a tremendous amount of trauma of where their tails used to be. And in all other parts of the world, it is now illegal to dock a dog's tails or ears. It is only in the United States that we continue this, what I consider inhumane practice of docking dogs' tails. Now with Corgis and some of the herding breeds like Aussies, there was a thought that the reason dogs' tails were docked was because when they're herding cattle, the tail won't get caught and pin the dog down, and especially with something as short as a Corgi, and then create a bad situation when he's trapped under the hooves of cattle. However, very few Corgis herd cattle these days, and in fact we're seeing that the Corgis that have their tails curl straight up and are fluffy, and there is no danger of that tail getting under a cow's feet. And in fact, Tristan's father, Buddy, herds cattle at the Cowtown Rodeo in New Jersey, which is the largest rodeo in the East. Buddy does not have a tail, as doesn't Tristan, but that does not mean that tail work cannot be tremendously beneficial for them. In craniosacral therapy, we also work with what we call virtual tail of an animal who had a tail and lost a tail. Also, many breeds of dogs, I have seen Labradors, Dachshunds in particular, are prone to having breaks in their tails. Dachshunds' tailbones are very tiny. They have quite a long tail, and many a dachshund has had their tail caught in a door or under a person's foot, or just wagged it really hard into the wall and broken the tail. So and we don't usually dock a tail when that happens unless there's a real problem with infection or something. And many Labradors wag and hit something like a rock or a big solid coffee table and break their tails as well, sometimes in their puppyhood. Our friend Gus, who lives up the road, has a broken tail right down at the tip of his tail, probably just a few vertebrae from the end, so it has a little L in the end like this. And they got him when he was 8 or 9 weeks old, and they don't know what happened to him. We have to remember that in utero, puppies and kittens are smashed up into a very tiny space. And it is possible that if you are arranged just so that your tail can be stepped on by one of your siblings in utero and create a break or a crimp in your tail before you're even out of your mother. So it's really important to do the tail work with your animal. It can really help dogs that are fearful or aggressive or timid or have issues with loud noises. Tail work is a wonderful thing that is easy to do. We use tail work in horses to help loosen the spine before competition. And I will never forget my niece Gwen when she had a little pony, and we had taught her to do many TTouch techniques with this pony. And she was doing tail circles with her pony before she went into the ring at a horse show. And I said, "Gwen, what are you doing?" And she said, "I'm winding up my pony so he's ready to jump," which was really cute, but really also the truth, because it loosens the spine and relaxes the horse and the person who's doing it, more importantly, so that they are able to go into the show ring and do a better job than if they had not done the tail work. So, as I said, it's really good for dogs with physical problems. And it makes gait improvements in your dog as well, because it does release the entire spinal cord and therefore can create a relaxation in the entire central nervous system. And again, as I've spoken of so often, the tail work really helps rebalance the sympathetic stress mechanism of the nervous system with the parasympathetic peace, rest, digest system of the nervous system, and allows that dog to come into emotional and physical balance. And as I've also said before, when your dog is in physical balance, he's in emotional balance. And so it's really important that you keep your dog or your cat or your horse or yourself in good physical balance, especially when you are working with an animal. I love the tail work for any animal with a neurologic problem. Again, EPM in horses is a really painful disease where their nervous system is invaded by parasites. So if you have a horse with EPM, while the tail work is really beneficial for them, you may want to have someone more experienced come and do this with you and show you how to do it the first time. I have found tail work with Corgis to be a really good thing for DM and for Lyme disease or anaplasmosis or any of the diseases that come from ticks and any other neurologic conditions. I have had really great success teaching cat owners how to do tail work with a kitty that's had a stroke or suffered some kind of spinal injury, falling from the refrigerator or something when they're older and not as agile as they were when they were young kitties. And one of the things I want to mention, I talked to several Corgi breeders and Corgi showers, and remember, this is a breed that is typically shown with a dock tail in this country. And in fact, because of the incidence of DM, which as I've mentioned is like Lou Gehrig's disease in dogs, they gradually become paralyzed from the hindquarters to the front, common in boxers, German shepherds, Corgis, and many other breeds. Some of these breeders have suggested that, in fact, docking the tail may contribute to the onset of DM in Corgis, or the incidence of DM in Corgis. I have to say, as my work as a craniosacral therapist has proven to me, the spinal cord continues all the way down into the tail, and the final ends of the spinal cord are the cauda equina, which are nerve fibers that run down through the tail. You cannot be helping an animal with a potential for neurologic disease by cutting off this end of the central nervous system. And in fact, you may be making your animal prone to be fearful of loud noises and things behind them when you are docking their tails. So while I cannot, DM is a genetic disease, and there has been no research to compare dogs with dock tails versus not, and the incidence and onset of DM, and there's so many other factors that go into it, exercise, weight, diet, that it would be impossible to isolate this as one factor. But I can't believe that docking a tail is beneficial for any animal because it interrupts the nerves of the spinal cord and therefore the entire central nervous system. So, tail work. Today we will start with Madison. Actually, she has a really good tail. She has a great tail. And she loves tail work because she gets lots of tail work done on her. So one of the things I suggest before doing tail work on your dog is to do some clouded leopards around the base of the tail first. Now these are circular touches, remember, using the pads of the ends of your fingers. And you're just going to do a few of these. Some dogs, especially ones with anal gland issues, will be quite itchy here. So then you might want to go to some little raccoon touches. But Madison is not itchy, and we keep her anal glands healthy because she has a good diet and a good weight and has a good life. So we're just doing some clouded leopards around the base of her tail. And then you're going to stroke down the tail several times just to introduce yourself to the animal's tail and the sensation of being touched on their tail. I love to do this with cats, but I've got to tell you, cats don't usually like this. So if you are working with a cat, be very careful and gentle, and even try to put your hand under the tail to support it as you do these strokes. And one reason cats don't like this is because people do what I just did with Madison. If you drop the tail and let it snap back, that is very uncomfortable. So you want to support it all the way to the end and release it gently so that it doesn't snap. Now she doesn't have any structure to her tail, so it's really hard to drop it and not let it fall. But it can be done even with the stuffed Corgi or Cavalier. So you want to do this stroke just to introduce your hand to the area. You'll have your other hand near the base of the tail. Tristan, can you hold Madison like this when you're doing this, just to support them. Then you're going to slowly create an arch in the tail by lifting it up a little bit like this. See how I'm bending it up? Very gently, just a little arch. And you're going to lift it up and push it towards the body a little bit. And then you're going to make a circle with the whole tail. And this is the work my niece Gwen was doing with her pony when she said, I'm winding him up before he goes into his class. You're going to do 2 or 3 circles in each direction. And ideally, you will see the movement going up the dog's entire spinal cord as you're seeing here with Madison. Some dogs will move really well to one side, and here you can see she's not moving, but when I go this way, she's moving well the other way. A lot of dogs, because people use the wrong kind of harness, leash, or head collar on them, or walk them pulled sideways, can't get that motion going to the other side. They're basically tight on one side and stretched out on the other side. So you can see Madison can go towards you pretty easily, but when I go the other way, she doesn't go so well. And that is because even as a stuffed dog, she's sitting curled to the side a little as she's sitting up to make her cuter. And so that makes her less mobile to that one stiff side. So you're just going to make several rotations in each direction. Then we slide our hand down the tail, and this, you really need your hand on the base of the tail for this. And you're just going to put a little bit of pull, traction on the tail, and I can feel it up here in Madison. Even though she's stuffed, I can feel the movement under my hand. And I just put a little bit of pull on the tail. And you want to hold this 4 to 6 seconds. And then you can slide down. And again, just pull and hold 4 to 6 seconds. And release. Now, when I do this with a horse, often I'll hold it longer, and that's not the same kind of work really, but it allows the horse to lengthen and lean into me, and then he'll shift his body to crack his back the way he needs, which makes the tail a really handy thing to have if you're a horse. Oh, I'm unmiked. I lost my mic. Geez, I hope you have been able to hear me. So it's really important to not let the tail snap back, as I showed you before, when you're doing this pull and release technique. And you just slide down and put a little more traction on the end, and then release gently. Now, if you have a dachshund with a really long, slim tail, you could do this 7 or 8 times. That's not the most beneficial way to do it, because as you get closer to the end of the tail, you're actually putting a strain on the structures unless you do this super gently. So I would only pull release maybe 3 or 4 times, even with a long-tailed dog like a dachshund or a Labrador. Now, you can also use what you've learned before with the, Tristan's getting a little, are you uncomfortable being a table for Madison? You can use what you've learned with the lying and clouded leopard circles on the tail. You would be supporting it on the top. And you can also do the hair slides I showed you, where you just go down each side like you're going to braid the tail, and you just pick up a few little hairs and separate them, pulling to each side. This is best to do with something like a golden retriever with a nice big fluffy tail, and they usually enjoy it. But you can do this even with a breed like a Dachshund or a Labrador that has a really tight, close hair structure on their tail. And it's nice if you have a dog like this with a fluffy tail on the end to just do a little bit of a pull. Really, it's a support and release when you get to the end of the tail. So that's how I would do this tail work with Madison, and she has a tail and she enjoys tail work. Now I'll show you how to do this kind of work with a dog with a dock tail like this guy has. He has a little stubby. So again, you're going to support him on his hindquarters, Now I can't make that kind of question mark shape with such a little tail, so I'm just going to come under it and support it. And this, by the way, is the same way you would do it with a rabbit. Rabbits have more vertebrae in their tail than any other species. There are a lot of vertebrae in those little bunny tails, which are called scuts. And it's really important, if you have a rabbit, to try to do some of this tail work with your rabbit. He will really like it, and it will be so beneficial to tension in their spines. They kick, people pick them up incorrectly, and they flip their hindquarters out. It's really important when you pick up a rabbit to support his hind feet. So this TTouch work on the tail is super beneficial for bunnies. So if you have a bunny, give this a try. Now you might not be able to get your hand under the tail like this. You might have to hold it from the sides, but make sure you're supporting the tail. If you can wrap your middle finger around and just support the underneath of the tail, because that makes a whole different feeling, and it releases the entire spine when you're supporting the tail from underneath. But I'm going to do his the way we would do a dog's. So you come underneath, and then I'm just going to use what little tail he has to make 2 or 3 circles in each direction. And I don't know if you can see with him, he's a pretty straight dog. As I'm doing these circles, you can see the movement going all the way up his spine into his head and his nose. This is a really great thing to do if your dog has just had any kind of surgery in their mouth, their ears, their face, because it does get movement all the way up through the spine in a really gentle way. And then for the pull release section, I'll just get a hold of the tail and put a little traction on it and hold it for 4 to 6 seconds. And really, this is so gentle. All of this tail work is done very slowly and very gently. And then I slide down a little further, do that little bit of a pull. And it's really hardly a pull. It's really just a gentle support through the tail. And then I'll slide down to the very tip of his tail and do one last one. And release it. And follow it up with some clouded leopards around the base of his tail. You could do some abalone python lifts back here, just to give him a sense of his hind end. Now, if you're doing this with a dog that is fearful of things around their hindquarters or fearful of loud noises, be cautious, because they are very protective of their tail and they hold a lot of tension there if they have these issues. So make sure you know your dog well and that you approach this with care. Try not to lean over your dog or make him feel trapped when you're doing this work. And surely this would not be the very first thing you would do with your dog. You have so many other options for things like the llama touch, approaching at the shoulder, or even doing a heart hug standing next to your dog, that you would choose to do first, not the tail work. So I'll show you with Tristan if we can get a view of his hind end here. Go ahead, stand on the dining room table, Tris. Oh. He says the tablecloth is very uncomfortable for a Corgi. You can come back this way a smidge. Oh, there you go. How's that, Biss? So you can see he has no tail at all visible here. So some Corgis do have a little stubby, like the British Corgi there, and some of my other Corgis. And I have to say that I think they really do recognize the fact that they don't have a tail. Tristan has a skunk costume he's really fond of wearing, and it fits him perfectly. It covers him completely and ties right in with his stripe. And the tail end of it fits him right where his tail would be. And when he has his skunk costume on, oh, he's sliding down. He does shake and wag his little skunk tail as if it was a Corgi tail. Now I'm going to have to support him from his tummy instead of the base of his tail, because he just can hardly stand on the slippery dining room tablecloth. We'll have to go back to the kitchen. So you can see I'm just doing some lying leopards here, and I'm starting to move into some clouded leopards around the base of his tail. It's okay, Tris. And I'll just do some python lifts back here to get him connected to his feet, because he's really nervous about sliding. So I will go to the very base of his tail, which, you know, it's about here. You can see how far they've docked this in. And it's not that, you know, people are being mean. They are doing what they think is the right thing to do. So we just have to forgive them. Use your ho'oponopono. I love you. I'm sorry. I forgive you. And thank you. And move on and work with this dog the way we can, because Tristan has many wonderful gifts for me. And I have to appreciate him and not get too caught up in what has happened with his tail to the point where I don't see the wonderful dog that he is. So I've got a clump of hairs here at the end of what would be his stubby. And I'm just going to make 2 or 3 circles. And I'm really supporting these hairs right at the base. Now, he is an athletic dog that uses his body well. And I don't know if you can see the movement in his whole body and spine just from me doing this work with his tail stump. Now, it's really important when you're doing this that you're not pulling the hair. Like I am really right against his nubbin, as we call them. And you can see the nice movement he has wagging in his spine all the way up even to the white spot in his shoulder. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of a pull here. And I can feel him in my hand that's underneath kind of pulling into me to stretch his top line. Did you notice how he repositioned himself so he's standing more square? So this is a great technique to do with a dog with any kind of balance problems, a senior dog, because they will realign their body to a more functional stance just by having that little bit of support on their tail, no matter they have a long tail or a short tail. And I use this a lot in my holistic physical therapy practice while dogs are balancing on cushions or those dog bones or even just some foam rubber. So you're just going to hold this 4 to 6 seconds and then very gently release. Now with this, I do something different. I imagine where his tail would be, and I do some long strokes where his tail would be. And this is a time when it's really important, as Linda Tallington says, to remember the cell's potential for perfection. And that could be with a virtual tail or a physical tail. So we're just, see how Tristan's looking at me? I know he has some sensation of where his tail would be. And you can also do, hold on, hon. You can also do the little hair slides on either side of their little stubby nubbin hairs on their tail. And then, don't be going down to the next diner's place, young man. And then I also will do some lying and clouded leopard circles where his tail would be if he had one. And he's sitting down. This happens pretty frequently, actually, when you're working with a dog's tail. And although you can't see it because he's sitting, I would continue to work with the tail, and I'll just do some clouded leopards on the table behind his tail, and then reconnect him with some Noah's March, and bringing my hand down where his tail would be if he had it still. Oh, the amount of hair coming off of this little animal is shocking. I brush him many times a day, and there is still piles of Corgi hair everywhere in my life. All right, hon, let's get you back on your pillow. So that's how you would do a tail work with a dog who has just a nubbin or their tail has been docked. Again, the tail work is really useful for aggression, because a lot of dogs that have aggression, or I call assertive issues, it's because they are fearful of things around their hind end, and no one has really helped them feel their body in space, and so they're very protective of their body. It's great for arthritis, because a lot of dogs that have arthritis have gotten a compromised gait going on where they're, stiff on one side, and so they might not be swinging behind as well as they could, and this will help alleviate some restrictions there in the nervous system and the muscular system to allow the dog to have a much more even gait. It's great for any kind of a back problem, as I said, any kind of systemic problem in the nervous system, but really this is a must for all senior pets, no matter it's a cat, a dog, or as I said, a bunny. It is really good for dogs who bite. Again, they are fearful of things behind them, and so they're very protective, and that may be one reason why they're using the front end here to protect their hind end. And I have a little dachshund friend I talk about a lot. He broke his tail, I think even twice, but each time after that he became much bitier and was attacking his little brother quite a bit. So do not underestimate the connection between problems in the hind end and what's going on at the front end. Fear of loud noises and thunder. Tail work is great for this. Again, because if you don't know where your hind end is in space and you can't, if you're all in your head panicking about some loud noise and you are brought to an awareness of your whole body and that your body is safe in space, it can help you calm down when you're having fear of loud noises. Similarly, for timidity, a dog who is timid may not be aware of where his body is in space. They're long animals. They're big, tall animals with a lot of leg, and sometimes they just don't know where they are in space. If you've got some of the bigger breeds that grow quickly, they go from being Tristan size to a Great Dane in a matter of weeks, really. Sometimes it's a couple of months, but still, as anyone who has children can attest, when they're growing and they have a growth spurt, sometimes they're a little clumsy and uncoordinated, and the same can happen with dogs and create a dog that is timid because he's not sure of where his body is. Tail work is really, really excellent for gait and balance problems. If you have a dog that does agility, fly ball, frisbee catching, or even just does a lot of running with you, it's really important to do the tail work with them to help improve their balance and gait and keep it so that it's symmetrical from side to side and they don't develop any kind of gait imbalances or imbalances in the musculature in their body. And to that end, I think it's really important that you pay attention to how you walk your dog. Are you dragging him down the street? Are you aware of his straightness in his body when he's accompanying you? Do you have him on a harness that attaches in the front and then slides around to the side so that you're pulling him sideways the whole time? These things can really create a lot of orthopedic problems in a pet. And really, because of the tensions that they put into the spinal cord, you can even develop organ problems just from walking your dog with the wrong type of harness for your dog. So really important to do the tail work if you don't have the right kind of harness to make sure that your dog's balance and gait stays symmetrical even though you're pulling him sideways when you're walking. And if you have any kind of gait problem, like if you have a limp, don't underestimate that will translate down the leash to your pet and create an imbalance in his structure and musculature when he's walking as well. So to that end, I would encourage you to try to walk as symmetrically as possible in order to keep your pet having a symmetrical gait as well. And the pressure with this is slow and gentle. And I can't emphasize enough with any kind of a dog that's had an issue with his tail, a break, or a dock tail like Tristan, how important it is to be really respectful when you're doing the tail work. And it can really improve performance in agility, if you have a horse, in jumping and performance competition. So the tail work is really important. And if you have a dog or a horse or a kitty with any kind of hip problems, hip dysplasia, SI joint problems, sacroiliac joint problems, where their pelvis has been a little tilted, you have a dog that perhaps came from a puppy mill and was a female having many puppies, or even just a dog that you've bred responsibly, but she had some really hard deliveries. The tail work is really good because it does create some flexibility and mobility in the hips and in the SI joints that other work doesn't do quite so effectively. So the tail work is a really critical part of anyone's breeding program, really, to keep your dog healthy before and after they deliver their puppies. And even for male dogs in a breeding program, I do think the tail work can be really beneficial. So that's an overview of some of the benefits and techniques we use to do Tellington TTouch tail work with our dogs, horses, cats, and bunnies. And I'd like to remind you that Linda Tellington herself will be doing a workshop in Rockville, Maryland in May. I believe it's the 12th to the 17th. And it's a really great opportunity to work with her in a beautiful setting in this lovely room with a blue floor We always have interesting dogs. My friend Pam Wanvier does a fabulous job of organizing the clinic, and it really is a treasure to spend a week with Linda with your dog. If you can't bring your dog, it's fine. We have plenty of dogs to work with, and you will be welcome anyway. And it's really just a precious opportunity to be able to meet her and work with her. So I can't encourage you enough, while there's still space in the class, to go to the Tellington TTouch website or call the main office and ask about joining our class. It is a wonderful area with many opportunities for different kinds of food. I'm a vegetarian. I managed to find food there just fine, and lots of different prices on places to stay, and there'll be plenty of dogs there. And we usually work with a cat, and if we have another animal, we'll bring them in as well. And I will be there, as will Tristan. So please, please mark your calendar and call the Tellington TTouch office and get one of those last places. We have a few left in Linda Tellington's dog workshop in Rockville, Maryland, in May the 12th to the 17th. And again, this is not that far. It's maybe 2 hours south of Philadelphia. If you live in New England, it's definitely an easy enough drive. I've done it many times. And it really is worth it because it's a great opportunity to meet Linda. And it really is a life-changing event in your life to connect with so many people that feel as you do about animals and really want to try to do the best to help them. We've had groomers, chiropractors, vets, dog owners, dog lovers all take the class, including people that are dog walkers, dog pet sitters. So it's a really good chance to connect with like-minded people and be in a wonderful facility and have a great week. So I encourage you to check that out May 12th to 17th at the Tellington TTouch website. And as I'm speaking of websites, Andrew, my nephew, is in the middle of repairing my website right now. And so if you are trying to get to SallyMorganPT.com, it may or may not work. But by next week, we will have everything in order, and hopefully the website will be working, and we'll be able to order different products and have access to all of these videos and my blogs, and it will be much more functional than it was in the past. So have some patience if you're trying to log on. I know it was still working. I don't know how for the last month, even though it had gone down. So, and you can always reach me on Facebook here, or by email at SallyMorganPT.com. Or no, that's the one on the website that's not working. It's SallyMorganPT@gmail.com. And that's the email address that works the best most of the time because I've had trouble with the website email. Andrew will be fixing that, so next week we'll be back with a better email. But right now, SallyMorganPT@gmail.com is the best way to reach me. And just a reminder, next week I will be on a radio show with Dr. Bernie Siegel in Connecticut at noon. I will give you more information about that as it gets closer. And in a few weeks, I will be at Equine Wellness Expo in like near Hamden, Connecticut. And I will also be doing a book signing and reading at a library in Hamden, Mass. So, Biscuit, what do you have to say? I'd also like to remind you that my sister, Dr. Judy Morgan, is doing a series on Cushing's disease on her Facebook Lives in the mornings, starting yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Cushing's is a really complex problem that people don't understand. Vets don't understand it. Chinese medicine is super effective. So if you have an animal with Cushing's, please go and check out my sister's Facebook Lives about Cushing's. And at some point down the line, I will be doing a talk about Cushing's as well. But you can get a lot of good information from her over yesterday and tomorrow as she's reviewing some information about Cushing's disease. Thank you very much for joining us today for a look at Tellington TTouch tail work. And in typical fashion in New England, we are having a snowstorm tomorrow. Ice, snow, sleet, all kinds of things. So I think I'll have power, and if we do, we will be doing our Facebook Live at the usual time around 8:25 in the morning. And then Saturday we'll be back at 9:25, and it's just supposed to be snowing into Saturday as well. So hopefully we won't lose power, and we will move back to the kitchen because Tristan is not very comfortable in here, although you do have a better view of how cute he is. And thank you for joining us today for a look at Tellington TTouch tail work, and we'll see you tomorrow with the snow flying. Bye-bye.